Hello, happy Tuesday. Hope you are doing well today. Thank you for tuning in to the Yes You May live stream podcast, where today we're all going to talk about finding grace for yourself, which I think is a very important topic because it's so easy to not give yourself grace. And I think the default that the majority of us find is to just give ourselves a hard time and to judge ourselves more strictly than anybody else is doing anyways. It's often hard to forget that we're the ones doing that. So I have a special guest. His name is Ron Chapman. He is a friend of mine that I've known for a little while now, and he is a very thoughtful, insightful, and reflective person who owns multiple businesses and has found his own way in becoming a better version of himself and then helping other people do so as well. So without further ado, I would love to bring on Mr. Ron Chapman.
Yay! Thank you, Amanda. That was an outstanding introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you coming in.
Delighted to be here, and this is like some of my favorite stuff. So thanks for picking the topic.
Absolutely. Well, I was doing some recon on you, and I noticed that was kind of one of your things that regardless of what business you're in or what work you're working on, that was kind of the through line, was like finding grace to understand who you are and then being able to understand who other people are.
Yeah. So there's a couple of really cool things there, Amanda. One of them, if you look at what's known as depth psychology, that's what Carl Jung basically was representative of. The notion they come up with over and over again is what we're looking for is what they call integration. What that means is that you have a portfolio of Amanda. I have a portfolio of Ron. It is what it is. We can add to it. I mean, more skills, more, all that. But the point is to get as much realization out of the portfolio of you that is available to you, to become as integrated, as functional, as valuable and useful as we possibly can become. Which I love that idea, because it's like, it's not about having a right package or a wrong package. It's like, let's see what we can do with your package. And that includes this idea of some grace for oneself.
Oh, I love that, because I think especially in today's social media society, it's so easy to get into that comparison game, right? And see the highlight reel.
Yeah.
You don't normally see, although I think it's becoming a little bit more common for people to be a little bit more real on social media.
Yeah.
But especially at first, it was all like the glam trips and the perfect photo with the perfect Photoshop, right? And that's not real. And then we all try to live into those implied standards that aren't what they should be in the first place, versus understanding who we are and how we can work with ourselves within our own toolbox to bring out the best of ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, I love this, Amanda, because it's not to the exclusion of our faults and foibles and screw ups and all that stuff. I mean, that's so inauthentic. And you and I both know that the people we really want to listen to is not the person who goes, well, I had a really fine plan and I executed my plan and there's been no failings. And I mean, nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody believes it.
It's like, we want to hear someone who goes, wow, I went face down in it today and totally biffed it with my client and had to eat crow and make it right. And God, it was awful, but I'm so glad I did it. That's what we want to hear, because everybody else has to eat some crow and make things right and all that. So, and some of that is that we have to offer ourselves this, a modicum of grace. There's a great line. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and there's a great line we hear often in the rooms of recovery, where someone will say, geez, if someone else treated me like I treat myself, I'd have to kill them. Because it's like we're so judgmental and hard on ourselves. And it's just not useful. We think it is, but it's just not.
It's not. I like the way you put it. It's not useful. Because it's not. And yet that's what we do. We do tend to get down on ourselves or judge the past version, or, oh, I should have done this. I could have done that. And it's like, well, but maybe you were doing the best you could in that time. That's something. Where did I pick that up from?
Well, I hope it was because you saw me post it somewhere. Here's the way. Maybe not. Maybe there's some other wise man out there. But Amanda, it's like, okay, so here's what one of my mentors taught me, a guy who worked with me for 28 years. What he helped me see is that in every given moment, each of us is really doing the best we are able for that time, place, and circumstance. It doesn't mean we're not, crazy. It doesn't mean we're not off the beam. It doesn't mean our hormones aren't off. It doesn't mean we don't screw up. It means at that moment, it's just the best we've got. And he would say, I love this. He would say, well, Ron, when I was getting hard on myself, he'd go, well, Ron, what could have been was. What could have been was.
Ooh,
Meaning that it's the best I got. That doesn't mean I don't need to get better. It doesn't
right.
mean that I haven't messed up, injured others, injured myself. But it means that at that time, place, and circumstance. And usually someone will say, well, yeah, well, what about Hitler? And like, well, and I'll just this is controversial, but one of the biggest experiences for me was 9/11. When I was in this conversation with some folks, and it occurred to me that the people who crashed the World Trade Centers, they believed they were doing their best good for their God as they understood their God. And it's like, I'm not saying that's right or justified or anything, but they thought it was the highest purpose they could die to on that day. And you go like, wow, that's insanely difficult to work with, but that's really what was going on. They were thinking it was the highest service to their God that they could come up with on that day. And man, that's breathtakingly difficult to work with, but there it is.
Well, and it also shows how influential other people can be on your own life.
Yeah.
And that if you're not paying attention to that, taking scale of that, and then also reflecting like what you grew up believing or seeing, right? We all tend to think that our parents were great and perfect as a child, right? Like, oh, everything's awesome. Well, maybe not everybody, but like we put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Some parental figure typically ends up being on a pedestal, and then you can become an adult and you're like, they're not perfect.
Yeah.
They were doing the best they could. They still have issues that maybe they haven't even worked through from their own childhood, and that's something I've talked about that on this before, actually, is like, we all have baggage from our childhood.
Yes.
With the best intentions from our family, doesn't matter. Like, we all have this baggage that other children even have put on us that we carry into adulthood and then never actually, rectify, or I don't know what the right word would be for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this goes, yeah. I mean, it's such a great subject because it goes back to something you said earlier. Okay, so let's presume we all get damaged, and some of us get damaged pretty badly. Easy enough to imagine. So we're not going to undamage ourselves, right? I mean, it's just not going to happen, Amanda. So the question is, how do we work with that so that we can find a different way of being with it, to make peace with it, to find some kind of harmony as a result? Father Richard Rohr, who I like to refer to as a renegade Franciscan priest, not like any priest most people ever heard, says it this way. He says that, okay, I'm paraphrasing, that which we do not resolve within ourselves, we will project upon others to great harm. And so, I mean, a part of this idea of grace to ourselves and extended to others, because you can't do it without doing it both ways.
Right.
Part of that is you just got to find a way to find out how to harmonize with that stuff. And that's like the magic elixirs. How do you make peace with and get the best out of those things, even when it was terrible or unpleasant? And I have lots of stories about that if you're interested, but I don't want to go on and on.
No, you're fine. That kind of brings up the first question that I had pre-planned.
Yeah.
Actually pre-planned something that should be exciting for some. Why do you think it is so hard to find grace for yourself?
In part because we are so intolerant of ourselves, and that intolerance is something we pick up. We're not born with that. I mean, if you think about any little kid, I mean, I know you've got some kids, right? I've raised a couple of daughters. If you think back to when they were really young, they got like no self-critique.
Right.
They're like walking around full of the universe. They're like, and we have to condition them and teach them and all that. But the problem is that so much of that comes across critically and harshly that we internalize the critic, and the critic becomes us. And so it's all learned, and then we project it on our kids, and it goes on and on and on and on. So in more recent, there's some great research that is being done in the realm of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs as it's known, where we now understand just how damaging a lot of those things are to children,
Mhm.
and then the children grow up and they bring it with them. And so everything we can do to mitigate that stuff, especially in ourselves, the better off our children and their futures will be.
I think about that sometimes, when I get frustrated with the kids or
Hmm.
something happens and I'm like, how are you showing up as the person you want them to be?
Yeah.
How are you being that example?
Yeah. And I mean, what that introduces, and this is sort of the heart of this idea of grace, is unconditionality, which is the hardest thing in the world because we get frightened by our kids' behavior and stuff happens and we have to respond to it. I often use this example when I do a bunch of work with people one-on-one, doing their own trauma work from their own childhoods. And I use this example. I go, okay, let's just be honest. If we were the Dalai Lama was raised with these loving, wise advisors who would say, Tenzin, you know that your nature is compassion. That's a bad way to act. Rather than
Mhm.
what we got, which was, Ron Jr., you little jerk. That's actually a nice word compared to what I heard. Right. So the whole difference
Right.
is how do you extend that unconditionality so
Mhm.
that you get it? I mean, they're just being a 4-year-old or they're
Right.
just being a 7-year-old. They're just acting like a seventh grader. And remember that in terms of the context. But it's so hard because we get wounded and we bring our wounds with us. And it takes a fair amount of reflective work to get clean on that stuff. And then, of course, you have to go back and repair all the damage you did
Right.
because it's disturbing when you realize just how much damage you did unknowingly.
Unknowingly, right.
Unknowingly, yeah,
Why do you
yeah.
think society doesn't embrace this idea more that we have to, work on ourselves, that we need to reflect? I feel like,
Mm,
in the religions, there's a decent amount of it, but it often
mhm,
isn't as straightforward as what you and I are talking about.
yeah,
Um, and I just feel like overall we're taught to like be strong, put on a, happy
yeah.
face, don't show the different emotions. Why do we all think we can just like get away with that versus actually doing the work that it takes
Mm,
to then become our best selves
yeah.
and then be the most fulfilled?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's learned and taught. That's because hurt people, including our kids, and so um, we just replicate it over and over again. And I mean, I oftentimes think about all the children in Afghanistan and Iraq and the legacy that they are bringing forward.
Mm,
And this is not to judge. I mean, the generations of warfare that have happened there. It's to understand that they are coming forward with a lot of baggage, just like a kid from an
yes.
inner city might have a lot of baggage, or someone who grows up rural in a terribly abusive family or community. I mean, they're just bringing it forward with them. And the thing is, Amanda, this is the I guess the magic space in which I prefer to work is Amanda, in order for us to find a different way, we're going to have to deal with some pretty deep wounding.
Right. And it's
And
not
it
fun.
and it hurts. It's
Yeah.
unpleasant. It's
Yes.
ugly. I was talking to a woman recently. Well, actually, we were in a conversation. She goes, "God, I look so bad with snot dribbling down my nose, and I can't breathe. I'm like sobbing." And it's like, yeah, well, yeah, that's like the truth of when we're dealing with stuff. But it's like so embarrassing to be seen as this mess that we sometimes are that we won't go there. And the result is we can't become authentic. You must have been following Brene Brown's work
Oh
around
yeah, Renee.
vulnerability and authenticity. And she's like all over this. Her research shows how incredibly valuable it is to do this kind of work so we can get real. And yeah, sometimes that means you're going to have snot dripping down from you. I know, like your listeners are going like, "I'm not doing that crap, man. There's no way." It's like, I'm sorry, you
Hopefully
can't.
they
You
don't reject it.
But I mean, the wise men and women of the ages have all told us you can't fully enjoy joy without having also spent a fair amount of time in all that ugly space, because the two are interconnected.
Right. You have to experience the up to appreciate,
Yeah.
or the down to appreciate the up. I almost said that backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys get
Well,
the point, but both.
yeah. Well,
Right?
again, I mean, whether you call this the classic hero's journey, from
Right, right, right.
mythology, or whether you look at this through a lot of the lenses of some pretty powerful spiritual and humanistic teachers, I mean, they all agree that there is a descent that precedes the ascent. You don't just go like this, right? You have to do the descent, because you have to deal with what Jung called the shadow self, which is all that ugly stuff we don't want to deal with. We don't even want to know that we have, because it's not pretty and it
Right.
hurt. It can really, I have to admit that there were times, as I was doing some of my own reflective work over the years, there were times when, I mean, Amanda, it like, Jesus, it hurt so much. I mean, I can remember at one point saying, God, just kill me. I
Right.
can't do this. This is too effing hard. And yet somehow or another I was able to come through that. And that inner depth work has been so valuable in opening up all this grace space and all this space for joy, because you can't tap one without tapping the other.
It's true. And it's also so amazing when you do the work, how relieving just getting something off your chest, and how
Absolutely.
quickly, I'm not saying move on permanently,
Yeah.
right? Because I think it's an ongoing process. And I think especially with the deeper set
Mm-hmm.
issues, they keep popping up, the tests, the trials, they keep
Mm-hmm.
popping up. But how quickly you can do the work, feel just pour it out, and then be like, oh,
Yeah.
like this huge sigh of relief.
Yeah.
So quick. But I do think it is something that's ongoing, and it has
Yeah.
to be top of mind. You have to be aware of what can trigger you as well,
Yeah.
so that you don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, spot on, 100%, as they like to say in the common vernacular. And if you're greeted with non-judgment, right? If when you cough up your emotional, psychological, spiritual hairballs, all the ugly stuff that I know, isn't that a great graphic image?
I do like that one.
Right? Here comes a spiritual hairball, Doc.
I love that.
It's a great. We should probably find a way to do a graphic on that,
What's
because it splats into the wall.
that'd be
Anyway,
fantastic.
and I know some listeners are going like, "Wow, we should clean this up. This is really graphic." It's like, no, this is real, right? I mean,
No,
let's
real
face
is
it.
better.
I call it hairballs because that's how it feels when it comes up. And all you got to do is watch a cat one time to realize. But
And
if non-judgmentalism can be on the other side of that, if you can, become snot slinging, unlovely, as they like to say, and if the person on the other side of that is able to not just validate it, but accept it and you, God, what a gift that is. It's one of the reasons why the recovery rooms, why a lot of identity groups are formed, because I have a friend who's trans, female to male trans, and he tells me that the conversations he's been able to have with other women who have become men are so very valuable, because he's able to talk about all the insecurities, the difficulties, all that stuff. And he's become an incredible guy, just an incredible guy. It's so cool to see that he has finally become who he was meant to be.
Yeah.
He was born misgendered. And he tells me, it's like, yeah, when I can talk with other people, it's like I can talk about those fragilities, those frailties, and people go, yeah, let me tell you how that happened for me. And what it does is it normalizes the experience, rather than
Exactly.
being told that something's wrong with us, or that you're damaged goods, or at worst the rolling of the what's wrong with you.
Yep.
And the answer is, that brings up. There was some great, I can't remember the name of it. She was on, the authors were on Oprah not long ago. And they said the operative question is not what's wrong with you or me, but what happened to you or me. Is that powerful?
Yes.
It's not
Feel
what's
like I heard that
wrong.
recently too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened
Yeah.
to us, and all of a sudden, and that's like part of that, being able to find someone to not be judged when you tell your particularly unpleasant truth.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I think that's really all it is, right? We all want to be loved,
Yep.
accepted, appreciated,
Yep.
understood. We are a communal society. We are communal beings who
Hmm.
have generally, I guess, I'm sure there's outliers everywhere. I always try to not be absolute in my words. I've tried to learn to do that better, but
Yeah.
there's always the outliers. But overall, we enjoy being with others and being accepted, which is where, social media comes from in the first place, is
Yeah.
putting, yourself out there and then getting that confirmation, that affirmation, that
Hmm.
those aren't the right words, but
Well, so here's what the research shows. I just love this. It turns out that the most functional groups, teams, communities, whatever, that they have a 7-to-1 ratio between positive experiences to negative. So let me put that in context. So
okay.
that means that during the course of this conversation, if we were really, really effective, you would, for every one thing that went in through your ears that sounded like critique or something, you would have 7 experiences where you knew that I validated, loved, and appreciated you, Amanda.
Wow.
Right? So, like
Wow.
when we started off and you did that killer intro, just me saying, and I actually wove about 3 in there, is it's like, that's like 3 of the 7 that you need to hear, because you're going to be criticizing yourself when we're done for something. You'll look over the video and go like, oh, that was so stupid. But you need to know that you're rocking it, right? And you need to hear that often. And people go like, well, that's so childish. It's like, no, children need 17-to-1. That's what the research shows, right?
10 more.
If you want to, and most of us are much more childlike than
Right,
we would
exactly,
admit.
'cause
So,
especially
so
those of us who haven't
yeah.
done any of the work and are and
So,
all self-aware.
so that is like a great exercise that people can use. I use it. In
Wow.
fact, I've been tracking it here in our conversation. Is when you go into a conversation, um, to like keep awareness. Some people even keep a tally of this, right? How many times have you complimented someone? How have you seen them for what
Wow.
they are? And watch yourself, and at the end look at it and go like, oh geez, you said 3 nice things and there were 6 crappy things. Like, you need to reverse that, Ron, because that is not helpful to the person on the other side.
Wow,
It's a
that's fascinating.
tremendous reflective feedback for ourselves. And one of the reasons why, whether we like it or not, feedback we give to others in any structured setting needs to really have a lot of valuing, a lot of positivity, a lot of acknowledging, a lot of love put into it. Um, but be remiss if I didn't say this. I know that we're talking about grace for ourselves. While we can practice extending grace to others, which helps us have grace for ourselves, which means unconditionality, in the end, you can't give it as well as when you can't give it to yourself. So it's like we have to do both.
Right.
We have to do both.
Which that's interesting too, because since we live in a society where there's a lot of stuff put out there, but a lot of us don't then interact, right? I
Hmm.
know I'm totally guilty of it. I'll see something that I like and I won't like it
Hmm.
or comment on it. And I've tried
Right.
to be more mindful of that, like in
Yeah.
person. I mean, the other day I was out jogging with Doggo, and this girl, I came up on like an intersection. She was like, "Hey, like I'm lost. Do you know how to get back?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you just follow this. Come with us." And I knew she was right behind me, but I didn't think much of it. I just went to the end. At the end, she was like, "Thank you so much. I was so lost." And instead of anything else, I was just like, "You know what? And I high fived her, and I was like, "You did great. Keep going." Because I'm trying to be more mindful
Right.
of giving that appreciation, because it's not only, doing it for somebody else, but like
Hmm.
it made me feel good too to high five somebody, right? Like it
Absolutely.
inherently feels good, and it's so incredibly important
Hmm.
to encourage people when we do see them trying, even if it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, and the challenge here is to remain authentic. We're not talking about whitewashing, where I just go,
Right.
"Oh, Amanda, you've never done anything wrong in your life. You like
Ugh,
always look perfect." It's like,
I've
no,
had a comment like that
that's like
recently
total
on
BS,
YouTube.
total
Oh, it
BS.
was awful.
But
I was
but
like, "You don't know me."
what
Of
it
course I have.
does ask me to do, and this is like again kind of a magic space in my mind, is how do I pay enough attention to you, Amanda,
Mhm.
so that I can really interact with you in a way that really sees and values you. Because see,
Mm,
I can give you some critical feedback if it's done with genuine, authentic love, care, etc. And if I'm really tending to your well-being, I can do that. And the result is it's really valuable, even if it stings. And of course, sometimes the best feedback does sting. And by the way, just for
True.
the benefit of our listeners, I have had opportunities to give you feedback on some
You
of these
have.
you've done in the world. And just to give you lots and lots of credit, you are remarkably receptive and you
Oh,
receive it
thank you.
so well. And I've seen what you can do in applying it. So somehow or another, you have that ability. And it's a beautiful thing.
It's a hard thing too.
Yeah.
I think what's harder than just applying feedback is, on this journey, I put out a lot and I don't necessarily get a lot of feedback, and it can get very like, is this
Yeah.
worth it? Am I making a difference? Should I keep doing this? Does anybody care? There's a lot
Yeah.
of, despite the fact that my whole premise is like trying to help other people believe in themselves, understand themselves, become the best version of themselves,
Hmm.
I still am constantly judging, questioning, you know, feeling like I'm not making the progress I should. And
Sure.
yet I know that if I'm consistent and I keep going, that even if I just help one person, then it's still worth it. And that I am gaining just by going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're describing the human condition for all of us. I mean, it's like how do we like let that stuff in and benefit from it? And some of it, I mean, the best feedback doesn't feel good.
Mm,
Right? It's that, I mean, okay, on a real simple level, and everybody's had this experience where, you wish someone had told you that you had pesto stuck between your teeth at that event, right? Even something silly. And so, you look at you and go like, oh, geez, I've been walking around with pesto stuck between my teeth all night long.
right.
But of course, there's stronger things like, I've on occasion had to provide coaching to people about how to give feedback for people in the workplace who have body odor or who have
Ooh,
halitosis, bad breath,
yeah, that's hard.
or who don't bathe well enough, obviously, and have come to stink. There's like that is hard to do, and of course, it's really challenging when you start trying to give feedback to people about. Um, okay, so their professional countenance and some of their skills and aptitudes, especially if they don't have a good, an accurate perception of themselves. So, I mean, this stuff ain't easy.
No.
But if we can do it without projecting our own unfinished business and offer them the grace that we ourselves would like to
Mm,
receive, it's going to go a whole lot better. And as far as I know, practice, 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 right?
right.
It's like Jesus, God, Ron, you did it again. You, yes,
Put in,
oh,
dang it. Oh, that's funny.
yeah.
It's interesting. I did an episode that I entitled Love Yourself Like You Love Your Dog, which I think
Mm,
goes hand in hand, which I got from the Four
mm-hmm,
Truths from
mm.
Miguel. It's around
Oh,
here somewhere. It's a good little book, but the concept
yes.
is like,
Mm,
we love other people, we do for other people. We get so excited for our dog, we take
yeah,
such good care, but we don't then do it to ourselves. And I think that just goes right along with what we're saying. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, you can help other people, but you're your own best advocate.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
you've
have
got
to
to.
appreciate where you were, where you're going, and where you're at in the very time being.
Yeah, I'm going to mention a really cool experience. I was just up in Vermont, and there's a place
Oh,
called
pretty.
Dog Mountain, and there's a dog chapel there. And this is going to make me cry. I have not been so moved as that in forever. This guy built this chapel, and people come and they put pictures and stories
Oh,
about their dogs, and see, the amount of love that is being channeled through. I mean, it is just a blow away. So profound and deeply touching when you realize that dogs are for many of us the unconditionality we always wanted. So
yes.
we've
Yes.
got these perfect models for it. But yeah. So uh, there's so much good to be said about this, and there's so much challenging about it. And in the end, maybe the best thing we can do is really keep tabs on our practice and how we're doing, and ask for feedback on how we're doing, because we just can't get any better otherwise. And who wouldn't want to be their best self? I mean, really, let's be honest. Who
Yeah,
wouldn't want to be their best self?
absolutely.
Um, nobody I can. I think I'm going to aspire to be a real craphead today. I mean,
Right.
what do you think? It's like, I mean, it's
Right. And nobody's intention is ever hurt
Yeah.
somebody else necessarily. Well,
yeah, yeah,
just to say, let
yeah,
me jump off of that
yeah,
cliff real quick.
yeah,
Why don't
yeah.
I?
There you go. Come back from that one.
Do you
Yeah,
have any tips, advice, tricks, habits that you think help other
yeah,
than just being mindful, listening to a conversation like this and being
yeah,
aware of it? Is
yeah.
there anything,
Yes.
you know?
My best tip is if it hurts or is uncomfortable for you, start there.
Mm,
When something happens where someone says something or does something, or you see something, you interact with someone, and it either makes you uncomfortable or hurts, especially if it makes you want to lash out, that's the reflective space that we begin with.
what's the best way to reflect on that? Or do
Well,
you think it depends on the person?
I'm a big fan of journaling.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
I've got a collection of journals that I've been working with for a very long time. And I'm serious. If it disturbs us, that means there's something within us that needs us to take a look at it, because we're projecting something outside of ourselves. And that's a sure sign. And, it helps to have therapists and confidants and, coaches
Dogs.
and mentors and dogs and all that.
But
But
seriously.
but that stuff, that, as Brené's Brown research has showed, that stuff does not go away when we don't deal with it.
No, it gets worse. It
Yeah,
gets buried, it gets worse, and then it builds, and then you
yeah,
end up lashing out
yeah,
unexpectedly
yeah,
because you've just been, pushing down, pushing down, pushing down,
yeah,
and then it blows up
yeah,
in your face, somebody else's face, your poor dog's
yeah,
face. I mean,
yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, I know you got to wrap us up because we're rolling on, but this is really a superb format for you, Amanda.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, this is a really good format for you. It's fun to watch you here. It's fun to see you be yourself, and yeah, it plays to your strengths. So do more.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It is hard to keep being motivated, like I said, when I'm like, what is it right? Is it not right? But it doesn't take as much as my perfectionist brain likes to think it does. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes what I have to remind myself is like, just put it out there.
Hmm.
Just do it anyways. And, maybe it not being perfect is actually a better thing.
Well, I got some interesting feedback once where I put some material out and someone said, "Ron, you got to be like not so polished. I mean, you didn't misstep. You didn't say." It's like, I even got that feedback on a couple of speeches, and it's like, oh, I need to make sure that I fumble and stumble some because it makes me real.
Right. It makes you relatable, makes
Yeah.
you real.
Yeah.
I think we covered pretty much everything.
Like,
I know.
mind exploding.
I
Too
think
bad we didn't have like 4 hours. And of course, then your listeners would go like, Jesus, cut him off.
it doesn't mean you can't come back. I need
Absolutely.
quality people that I have rapport with. I think that's the most important thing.
I would accept in a heartbeat. Again, it's good format for you. It's a lot of fun for me, and I love talking
Good.
about this stuff. So bless you for asking me. I'm
I think it's
delighted.
interesting, and I knew you would have a lot of interesting thoughts on it because you've done a lot of work on it,
Yeah.
and you've admitted that, hey, I'm not a perfect human, but
Yeah,
I do have
some of my
thoughts.
I have deliberate strategies on my social media presence. I am very intentional about letting people see my bad days, difficult days, sorrow-filled days, the place I screw up. Some of my favorite posts are when I will put something, I'm just like, God, I biffed it with a client today. I mean, I just totally biffed it. And people will go like, "Oh, Ron, I'm so sorry." It's like, no, I do this all the time. It's like,
Right.
I mean, I'm good at what I do, but I screw up regularly. I mean, come on, let's be real.
I'm good at the screw ups and making it polished. I can polish
Well,
a screw up like none other.
well, there's some
Me
really
too.
cool stuff in some of Patrick Lencioni's work. He's one of the guys who works a lot on organizational functionality, and he says it's not that you're not going to make mistakes. It's what you do about the mistake. That's
Mhm.
how you build trust. That's how you build connection. That's how you build community. That's how you build a team. That's how you do it's just like, not because we don't make mistakes. It's what we do with the mistakes. And maybe that's the greatest formula for grace, right? Is not that we walk the earth with perfection, but that we walk the earth being able and willing to make right the things we do wrong, because it's oh so important. That might be, yeah, boom, yeah. Yeah. Stop aspiring to be great. Start aspiring to fix the things that you're not great at. And P.S. You've all got them because you're human.
And embrace what you are good at, and
Yeah.
be willing to learn what you're not. If you're not great at something, it's okay. Nobody expects you to be great at everything, and you're not for everybody. Not everybody's gonna like what you do. I know very well that I'm a lot. I got a big personality and a lot of expression, and some people are like, "Oh, okay, all right, she's
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yep. Okay. Well,
you know what? I'm okay with it now.
you're not
It,
some
it
people's
took
cup
a
of
long
tea.
time.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, but it's okay.
Nor am I. Yeah.
It's okay. Well, I think that's a good
Okay.
note to leave it on. I
Okay.
appreciate
Beautiful.
so much that you decided to come on. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, check out his website, ronaldchapman.com, or I believe you could email him, ron@ronchapman.com. Ronald, right? Wait, I said that wrong,
Right.
didn't I?
Yeah. Ron@ronaldchapman.com. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should just let the guests tell their
Yeah.
own stuff.
Yeah.
It probably
Yeah.
would
Or
be
you
more
can
accurate.
or you can Google me, and I bet you can find me because it's like Google finds everyone, right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know. That's why I use my whole name. Side note, I use
Yeah.
my full name because there's a lot of Amandas and there are a lot of Grays, but there are not a lot of Amanda May Grays.
Yep.
Actually, there's just me. So there you go. I
Perfect.
used to not like my name because it rhymed, and everybody else was like, "That's cool. It's memorable." I'm like, "Really? We like it? Oh, okay, all right."
I guess I'll embrace it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, Rod, thank you so much for coming on and talking all about finding grace with yourself with me. I appreciate you, and I'm sure you will come back to the Yes You May podcast in the future, and we'll have more exciting conversations. But otherwise, to everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, any ideas, feel free to leave a comment, or if this is something you think would resonate with somebody else in your life, totally share it out, because the more people are aware that they need to be aware, the better society as a whole will be. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Amanda.